Right, and we continue then on this conversation as we observe World Food Day. And to commemorate the day, academics and activists earlier today shared insights on the impact of the food system on ensuring the right to food and ending hunger. The aim of this event was to build momentum for advocating for the right to food and to demand an end to hunger and just food systems. Now, to tell us more via Zoom, we're joined by Professor Julian May, the Director of the Centre of Excellence in Food Security at the University of the Western Cape. Prof. Julian, thank you so very much for joining us here on SABC News.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Now, I want to talk about food security, particularly in the context of COVID-19. So I'm perhaps, maybe jumping the gun a little bit. It's something that we should look at as a whole, but certainly COVID-19 has made a lot of already bad situations worse. And I'd really like to talk on that, on the issue of that link between food and security and what COVID-19 has done to make that situation actually quite worse.
Yes, in South Africa, I think we've always taken for granted that we are a food secure country, meaning that we produce enough food to feed our population. But what COVID threw up is that although we might produce enough food, a significant share of our population are not able to afford to purchase that food.
And that's really quite sad, isn't it? I mean, and I wonder, there's a lot of food waste, from those who are able to have, as much food as possible in their homes, for example. What is our role, those of us who aren't battling with, putting food on the table? What is our role to play when you're saying that, we are producing enough? What is our role as a society to be doing for those who perhaps are not managing?
Well, there's two aspects to food waste. The one is what we refer to as food loss. And this is food that is harvested in the field, but doesn't reach the consumer. And that could be because it's lost in storage, because it's damaged, it isn't sold in the shops. And then there's food waste itself. And that's what happens when people who are middle class buy more food than they can eat, and some part of it is thrown away. Yeah. We need to do something to address both kinds of food waste. So that includes improving how we store food once we've harvested in the field. So it's cold storage, it's better facilities, it's swifter transferal of the food that's harvested to the supermarkets and shops that sell it. Yeah. It's generally shorter value chains. And then there's what the consumer can do. A lot of that is then about managing your purchasing patterns more carefully, as well as looking to ways in which food can be recycled. So we can significantly reduce how much food is lost in the household, and we can have a farming system and a food processing system that wastes less food before the consumer even buys it.
I want to talk about some of the solutions perhaps that might have been presented by the academics and activists who earlier today shared insights on the impact of the food system on ensuring the right to food. Is there a clear understanding to the fact that it is a right, is a right that is enshrined in the Constitution, the right to food? Are we perhaps losing that understanding?
I think we may have been not paying enough attention to that right. So we have two kinds of right. There is the absolute right of children to sufficient nutrition. Yeah. In other words, that's something that the government and that's all governments, all levels of government must provide to the citizens, to the children of South Africa. And then there's the progressive right to food, which is an undertaking that government will steadily improve the entire population's access and use of food. And that's not just whether we get sufficient food, it's that the food is safe and that the food is nourishing. So government and all structures of government must do something about improving the position of children in South Africa. That's a non-negotiable, and that's something which we really need to see done with as much effort as possible. It's about school feeding, it's about vitamin A supplementation to mothers and very young children. These are all policies that we have in place. Ultimately, it may involve directly delivering food to mothers and to children. If that's what we needed to do in COVID as quickly as possible. Yeah. The progressive right is something which has not really been talked about enough, and I think increasingly there are questions as to has government gone far enough, and what more must be done to nudge government to be able to deliver more on the progressive right to food of all citizens of South Africa.
Perhaps this is where I should have started, Prof, but perhaps you can talk to us really about the differences between hunger, chronic malnutrition, undernourishment and food insecurity. And I suppose there's a little bit of both in all parts of the continent. And I wonder where South Africa really stands instead of where the biggest issue is in this country.
So let me start with your last question, where South Africa stands.
Yeah.
We are, depending on the statistics, the wealthiest country in Africa or the second wealthiest country after Nigeria. Either way, when you compare our statistics of forms of chronic malnutrition, and particularly those of children, we are an outlier. We're a wealthy country that has a very high percentage of our children that are stunted. Stunted is a way in which we measure chronic malnutrition. It's when a child gets so little energy, so little food and calories and micronutrients that the child does not grow to the height that they should be able to achieve. And this isn't about whether people are tall or short. It's an indicator of physical development throughout the child's body. So it also means compromised immune systems, absolutely vital during a period such as COVID, when we're facing an illness, as well as impaired health as that child gets older. So children that are stunted are also more prone to non-communicable diseases such as diabetes and hypertension in later life. So that's chronic malnutrition. It's when there simply isn't a child or an adult does not absorb enough calories to be able to live a healthy life.
Yeah. And then
hunger is a perception.
Yeah. Continue. Sorry, Prof.
Hunger is a perception. So people describe themselves as whether they feel hungry or not.
Yeah.
So it's a short-term thing. It can be used as an indicator of food insecurity, but also you can eliminate hunger by eating quantities of unhealthy, cheap food. So snacks, food with high salt, high sugar, high fat content. And that leads to the other problem that South Africa faces. We call it a double burden, where we have both undernutrition, people don't get enough to eat, and overnutrition, where people are consuming too many calories, and as a result are prone towards overweight and obesity.
All right, Prof, thank you so much for giving us that lesson. Thank you for giving us your time on SABC News. That's Prof. Julian May, Director of the Centre of Excellence on Food Security at the University of the Western Cape, as you observe World Food Day. Many thanks, sir.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a short break. Your sports news after this.